Day 964 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 670,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,260 in the past day. Then as for hardware losses, 4 tanks, 19 APVs, 11 artillery, but also a loss not shown on these figures. As a result of not being a direct military engagement, we saw some footage of an additional aircraft loss. But before I jump into that, we'll firstly take a refresher look at the territory of control figures for added context, given how the Russian army has been making a number of incremental gains in certain regions on the Ukrainian map in the last couple of months. As such, we'll take a look at the area of control, as currently Russia sits on 18.28% for their occupying of Ukrainian lands. Now, if we were to go back in time to August of this year, Russia at that point occupied 18.18% of Ukrainian land, which therefore accounts for a total increase of 0.1%. So at that rate of land gains, this means it will take about 140 years, or the equivalent of 2 Putin lifetimes, to conquer Ukraine. So we can forget about Putin trying to outlive this one, and he is indeed trying. With the paranoid leader pouring billions into Russian-based research for the cure to aging. No doubt, especially in a place like Russia, that research funding will get almost completely misappropriated. But as for these figures we can see on the screen, Russia has to catch up to itself, because after its initial blitzkrieg land gains, their military captured about 25% of Ukraine, only to lose 7% from Ukrainian liberation since, bringing them back down to what we see now at 18-odd%. But bearing in mind, 7% of that was taken back in 2014 with parts of the Donbass and Crimea. So it is quite difficult to find a pro-Russian angle in all of these figures, meaning that the online propaganda trolls or bots, the ones you see in the comments section below, have the unquestionable desire to ignore this data. Then headed across to the map with what's been a notable string of aircraft losses in the last week for Russia, as most recently Ukraine's defense intelligence has claimed responsibility for a fire that destroyed a Russian Tu-134 military transport aircraft at the Orenburg airfield, occurring in the early hours of October 13. The aircraft, used by the Russian Ministry of Defense, was part of the 117th Transport Aviation Regiment, so the initial part of the supplied video clearly shows a fire lit inside the plane's navigator station, which is the old-fashioned glass-nose segment, where the fire can also be seen making its way up to the adjacent cockpit of the aircraft. The final part of the video shows the outcome of the event, with the large fire destroying the plane, leaving it crispy. Or, given the actual NATO-reported name of Krusty, now becoming a plane much more worthy of its name. Now, just prior to this event, Russia lost a Su-34 and Su-25 jet, a military training aircraft, and an Mi-8 transport helicopter, all within the space of the last 7 days. And given their unfortunate use of relying on the global supply chain to build these aircraft over the many years, Russia's ability to build and replace these aircraft has become extremely questionable. In fact, by their own admission, about 6 months ago, they stated that they could possibly produce 2 to 3 aircraft per year for only a handful of their aircraft platforms. Then to take a look at some of these incremental Russian gains on the map, something that the Russian accounts use to paint a very grim picture for Ukraine. But in any case, let's take a look at the Pokrovsk direction, south of Pokrovsk, as we saw some Russian activity south of Seladova, which were technically not really gains per se, but instead an expansion of the grey zone here. Meanwhile, further to the north, the Russian Z army works non-stop to try to capture the town of Toretsk, where Ukraine continues to make the invading force pay for gains at this location. Although right now it's more accurate to say making them pay for their mere presence, given that the area of control hasn't changed for almost a week now. We did see some close quarters combat, with the footage and images expected to be from this very region, where it was said that the Russian soldiers failed to maintain this position because they had mistaken the Ukrainian soldiers for that of their own. Then we'll move more north on the map to Juzzie Yar, where some map changes were noticed, with Russia taking up positions about 2/3 of a square kilometer of land beyond the canal, so that is to say the southeast of Juzzie Yar, and about 1/3 of a square kilometer to the north as well. But there's no mystery coming from these locations, as Russia has been using these land gap openings over the canal from which to launch their offensives with, where these advancements have been part of a longer cumulative effect from many prior assault attempts to take the town. So the Russian strategy here is mostly straightforward, where apart from aviation strikes firing into various parts of the town to the west, the Russian ground forces are limited to just a few entry points, which puts a squeeze on their forward movements, under the constant threat of Ukrainian artillery fire, but more often than not it's FPV drones. So Russian positions like these really turn into a question of, are they bridgeheads that the Russian forces are able to sustain? And thereby, can they find the capability to launch further offensives from? Because we're very much looking at logistical bottlenecks, making for such a costly or attritional choice of offensive operations for Russia. Then headed way across on the map, and we must move across to the Ukrainian liberated northern bank of the Dnipro River, where clearly Russian drone operators just don't give anything of a damn about even the most basic, generally accepted rules of war. Because not only did this Russian drone operator decide to drop a munition on a very clearly labeled UNHCR vehicle, which is a United Nations Human Rights Council asset, he obviously thought it was just as brilliant an idea to upload this footage for everybody to see. Not exactly a useful military target either, and is an event which once again puts on display Russia's consistent use of indiscriminate fire. And it just truly boggles the mind that this genius decided to upload this footage, even if they genuinely considered it a real military target or threat. It shows a real lack of training with inexperienced operators, but also because in this example, the Russian operator aimed near the center of the target, but the warhead ended up becoming an imprecise hit, missing its target. Then we'll take a look around on the map today because somewhere in the east, a Ukrainian drone operator correctly performs targeting compliance, taking out a Russian Desert Cross ATV buggy. Kind of surprising we still see these, with this event happening in the Pokrovsk direction. Then also in the east, we saw the case of a Buhanka van driving Russian soldier narrowly escaping injury against an FPV drone, though he did lose his windshield in the process. Then also we saw the Ukrainian Shadow unit finish off a fallen Russian Orlan 30 reconnaissance drone. The chute deployed, allowing the drone to land more gently to the ground, which means either one of two situations applies here. This could either be due to a safety mechanism, perhaps due to an air-to-air engagement, thereby triggering the release, or it turned around after performing its successful reconnaissance mission to be picked up by its operators for refueling. But if it were to be that second option, we would have likely seen some corresponding footage of targeting of the Russian operator crew as well. What they do is they drive in a pickup truck to the final destination to recover the drone for later use, where they are often found to be targeted as well. Then headed across directly to a Russian military mobilization blunder segment, because in this uniquely rare example, we see the travels from start to finish of a very patriotic Russian man that proudly creates a video log on the before, during, and after for his time in the SMO. So firstly, he eagerly tells of how he signed a contract with the Russian MOD to go to the SMO, And this guy at certain segments is really excited and ready, going so far as to even vocalize some very sadistic plans when he gets there. Then he makes it to the SMO, Kursk specifically, and realizes it's not what he expected. He says his commander doesn't care and sends many to the meat grinder, a process which this new contract soldier says is very hard to escape. However, he continues his video logs, even with the very grim situation he said that he finds himself in, and down to the very last couple of hours before he has to storm some frontline position, he's still making these video logs, where his sentiment changes to one of not a lot of hope at all. Then on September 12, exactly 3 weeks after signing a contract, but only 15 days after he arrived in Kursk, he was reportedly eliminated in battle. So this is technically a span of just over 2 weeks. The training itself should have taken longer than that, which was likely non-existent anyway. But what a direct insight this is to what's been pieced together as the expectation or reality Russian recruits face when they go to war. It's also further insight into what I often refer to as the self-created status quo Russia finds itself in with this war, with the constant need to refill its ranks with new soldiers due to the extremely limited active time span of the average Russian soldier in the war. There is nothing militarily sustainable for Russia about this disastrous strategy, which can only be described as a strategy of a desperate military. Then headed across to a change of segment to round it all off for today, guys, with a not so funny segment where I choose to believe that only a smaller segment of Russian society is all about brute force tactics, like this Russian meathead next to his embarrassed wife, where his idea of strength is smashing vegetables on the kitchen table, not to mention the additional watermelon impacts quite literally headfirst into his own noggin. That's gonna cause some long-term brain damage. But I don't see any Russian strength from this awkward display of power. Just a clear lack of intelligence. Russian salad, anyone? So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like, subscribe. I really appreciate the here and there trickle of support that I see come through. I'd like to thank my Patreon subscribers, the Buy Me a Coffee crew, and of course the super thanks as well. So once again, thanks so much, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!